Hi, it's Jen with thebayhome.com, and today we are talking all things sourdough. And I'm so excited to have Rebecca with me today. And Rebecca, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because I'm going to guess your last name, Nogueira.
Nogueira.
Okay. I'm like, I know I don't know how to I'll butcher that completely, and I did. So
It's okay. Yeah, it's kind of hard. I mean, I feel like it looks harder than it actually is, but I understand. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have three kids, three little ones, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-month-old. I got married young, so I've been doing this for not too long, 6 years now. And yeah, we really like eating homemade stuff. And so bread is something that we eat a lot. I think like most people. And so I wanted to get started on just making my own bread and specifically sourdough for the benefits. And honestly, I find it less intimidating than using like traditional like yeast products for whatever reason. Maybe it's because I've been doing it for a while, but yeah, I really enjoy doing sourdough. The kids really like doing it with me and they love eating it. My husband absolutely loves it. Every time I make something, he's like super excited. So yeah.
yeah, there's definitely nothing better than that fresh, homemade bread. And usually when I make it, we don't even let it cool. It's warm and it's gone.
Yeah.
So I try to double or triple batch so we can have one loaf now and then after it's cooled off, actually have some for sandwiches and stuff like that, or
Right.
toast or whatever. But that's awesome. So we'll jump into some of the questions. And we're just going to kind of talk about the basics of sourdough. So what do you think are the basic supplies needed to make sourdough?
Okay, so very basic. Obviously, you need a sourdough starter. You need flour, water, salt, and some sort of bowl, maybe a kitchen towel, and your hands. That's honestly all you really need. And like measuring cups or a scale. But yeah, pretty much that's what it is.
Yeah, and I totally agree because I see people online kind of get carried away with things and being like, I don't have this and I don't have that, so I can't make sourdough. It's like, no, you can use anything. You don't have to have the proofing basket and all those different things.
Right.
So let's get into all the additional things. And do you have those additional things yourself?
I do. So I have like the proofing basket. I have the lame, like so like the little but man,
Is
the
it like
little
a knife
razor,
razor?
yeah, the little knife to cut. I'm drawing a blank right now, but yes. I got a KitchenAid mixer as a gift last Christmas. And so that's like extra, but that's like super extra, totally not necessary. I did not have that for most of my marriage. I just got it. What else? I have like a cool little like dough whisk, like
Oh
the
yeah,
little
those
dough whisk,
circular
like
ones,
the
right?
Danish ones. Yes,
And
that's
so I guess because I don't have that, how are they? I know that they're obviously different than whisk whisks, but they're just
mhm.
more sturdy and allow space and
Yes.
I'm
So
like,
it doesn't get caught up as easily when you whisk, it kind of gets caught up in all the wiring or whatever of the whisk. Since there's like the holes or whatever, it kind of, I feel like it needs it a little bit easier. It's easier, I feel like, than using your hands, but also like it's totally unnecessary. It's just kind of an extra thing. It's a convenience thing, I would say. Obviously, the KitchenAid is like the next step for convenience. You just turn on the kneading or whatever and it does it for you.
yeah,
So
the KitchenAid is my favorite, honestly, the mixer, just because you can kind of just pour everything in and walk away.
yes.
I mean, not totally walk away, but be in the vicinity, do dishes or
Yeah.
get off the
It's less
counter, get lots
hands-on.
going. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really love my KitchenAid, but I use it a lot for a lot of things too.
Right.
Can you use that whisk thing? What was it called again? Sorry.
I think it's like a Danish
Okay.
whisk hook, I believe it's called.
So can you use it for other things besides bread making? Do you
Oh
know?
yeah, for sure. Yeah, you can use it in all sorts of, I mean, you can use it as a replacement for your regular whisk and anything
Okay,
basically.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. Okay. So then, what flours do you normally use, and overall, what flours have you worked with?
So right now what we've been using is just like the regular organic unbleached all purpose. We buy it at Costco because that's honestly been the most convenient and just honestly the most affordable right now. But in the past, I have used einkorn, so organic all-purpose einkorn. I've also used like whole grain einkorn, um, but like pre-ground, so I didn't grind it myself. And recently, I have tried a little bit of so there's this brand, I think it's called Sunrise Flour, and they have like heritage grain wheat berries. And so I tried grinding my own wheat berries with my KitchenAid mixer with the attachment. And that actually worked out really well, but I haven't like gone too much into doing that. So that's something that I want to explore more, like grinding my own wheat berries to do sourdough with that. But for right now, like I said, we've been just with the unbleached all-purpose organic from Costco.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't realize, so you said it's an attachment for the KitchenAid?
Yeah,
I didn't realize that they had an attachment because I've been thinking like, should I buy like a grain mill? But I'm like, no, I'll wait. Like, because I know you can buy a lot of stuff in bulk from like Azure Standard and stuff.
right.
And right now we're currently using einkorn flour, but we definitely have gone through phases where we've done just organic, all-purpose flour, and then there's been even phases where we just did regular flour that because our Costco actually doesn't have organic flour anymore.
Oh, really?
We have to go to a place that's an hour away, and it's just like a local mill place, and they do have
Okay.
like option.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
I always tell people like, depending on your budget, like always
Yeah, for sure.
obviously organics better, and then the next step would be einkorn since it's ancient green, but we won't get into all that right now.
Right.
And then so how do you start a starter? Like, what's the basics of just all that?
Okay, so I'll be honest, I've never actually had my own starter from scratch because for a few reasons. So I have read and from like speaking to other women who have messed with sourdough that for you to get like a good rise in your bread, you need to have a mature sourdough starter. And so that I've had two starters and I've gotten them from friends. And my bread has always, not always, in the beginning, obviously there's that learning curve, but once I finally got past that learning curve, the bread has had a good rise. However, I have had friends that have tried to start their own sourdough starters and they have had success with it. And so, like, it's very simple, very basic. You just need flour, water, and you just, feed it. People do the measuring. I don't do measuring. I kind of eyeball it. And so, equal parts water and flour. And then, obviously, depending on the consistency, I know that also varies for a lot of people. If you want, like, I guess, a thicker, you want like a little bit thicker than pancake batter, but some people have like a runnier. And so you have to, you feed it a little bit, you remove some, you have to discard it for a little while, and then you feed it again, discard it until it starts getting a good enough rise. So, but like I said, I've always relied on, I've gotten it from friends. And so, yeah.
And I think if you're a beginner to sourdough, that's probably the best option. If you do know someone locally that you can just get a starter from, it's like less intimidating. I feel like, just to start with that, and then you'll have like those quicker results, like you're saying.
Right.
I've done like because I kill starters like crazy. And so like I will take like some of the discard sometimes and I'll put it in the fridge so that way if
Mm-hmm.
I do kill it, then I have that as my backup.
Right. Yeah, I
Um,
do that too.
and then there has been times where I've just totally killed everything. And so I have tried just doing it on my own, just the flour and the water. And it does take a few days, and I feel like I've had okay success with that. But I do feel like I've learned more of like that consistency that you want it to be, where in the beginning, I didn't need all the measuring cups or I needed to like pull the scale out and make sure it was all like what it said online and stuff. So I am glad now that I have it down a little bit more. So
Right.
all right. So the next question is if you're intimidated by a sourdough starter, like do you feel like you were intimidated initially by it? And how did you overcome that, I guess? And what are you
Well,
for that?
oh, okay. So in general with sourdough, I was very intimidated at first because of all the measuring. So, when I saw people do it, it was like you need to have a scale and you need to measure out the X amount of flour and X amount of water, and you need to make sure that it rises this much, and then you need to discard this much. And then I was just like, this is way too much, and it's just too overwhelming. I'm not going to do this. But once I finally actually just started doing it, and I kind of threw out the rules and just did what kind of just felt it out and just like, okay, I'm going to start it and I'm going to kind of eyeball it. And like, if this looks right, if this has like a good consistency that I'm seeing other people achieve, then I think it'll be fine. And once I finally got the ball rolling with it, things became a lot simpler and way less intimidating.
Yeah, and I agree. And I because this is actually a question from one of my Instagram followers, and my encouragement is just be okay with failing too. Like, it is a learning curve. And so you are gonna mess up. Even still, like I said, sometimes I do kill starters still because I think, oh, I'll be home, so I pull it
Mm-hmm.
out and I'll feed it, and then like I forget about it because I'm all of a sudden all this stuff came up or something, you know.
Right.
So it's okay, and even us who have done it for a while still sometimes fail. So
Yes, definitely.
um how do you use the starter? So I'm going to tell a quick story. When I started this years ago trying sourdough, I didn't really know the benefits of it. I didn't really know all the details of how to do it. I just knew how to make the starter, and then like I let it rise and fall, and I didn't realize like you had to like get it on the rise.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I would just like make bread anyway or make pancakes, and I think the
Mm-hmm.
pancakes probably turned out just fine, but like I don't know
Right.
about the bread. I can't even remember if it was like super dense or what happened.
Right.
But yeah, so now I know exactly like what more details of how to use it, but go ahead and tell us.
I'm sorry, can you just repeat the question?
How do you use the starter? Like,
Oh, okay. So yeah, well, okay, so yeah, how I do it is if I want to bake bread like the next day, right? I'll pull it out of the fridge, I'll feed it a little bit. And like I said, I don't measure anything, I just eyeball it. I'll feed the starter and then I leave it on the counter. The next morning, it's usually bubbled up enough where it'll just start to fall, or it's like right at that point, where it had just started falling, and I'll just make the bread right away or whatever it is. And sometimes, certain recipes, you don't even need a bubbly starter. Sometimes it's just, if you're going to make like banana muffins or whatever, which is something that we make a lot, you just use your sourdough discard. And so I just, discard it into the batter, and then I just use it like that. So
yeah,
it really depends on the recipe.
yeah, no, that's good. And then do you measure like I know some people like will mark their like the beginning of it before it bubbles. Do you do that at all?
I don't. So I'm very like, I like to, like I was explaining before, like too many rules for things that just really like turns me off, and it scares me because I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to follow the rules correctly, and I don't know if I'm going to do this the right way, and then it's just going to be a mess. And so I've just learned that I like the whole like the I don't know, like more hands-off approach where I just kind of, if it looks right and it feels like it's going okay, then most likely it will. And so far that's worked out for me. So yeah, I don't really, yeah. I mean, the only thing that I do measure out is, when I need to make like a recipe, when you need like exact measurements, then I'll measure things. But feeding sourdough starter and like checking, I kind of just, if it looks right, then that's pretty much how I do it.
I think that's great. Yeah. And I know some people don't have that ability to just eyeball and like feel the texture and stuff. So I found I like those Pyrex measuring glass ones, you know?
Oh yeah.
So I'll put my starter in there, and I think I do like 2 cups worth of starter, and then it'll bubble up to 4. And so
Okay.
that's how I know, you know, and it's kind of just nice to have those marks on there versus like,
Right.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like that way, but I think it's great. And then, so what do you think would be the best or easiest thing to make for a beginner? Like, should they start with bread, or should they start with maybe doing the discard, doing more basic things like pancakes, or what were your thoughts on that?
Okay, so for a first ever, like you have absolutely no idea how this, like, the sourdough thing works. I definitely would recommend like discard pancakes because they're very simple. You just throw some in. I mean, there are different recipes. So the one that I used to make a lot was purely discard. So I would just feed like a whole bunch of starter the night before, and then use that like mix, and then just I think it's like baking soda, and then you add like eggs and butter and stuff, and then just use that and make pancakes. Super simple. You get the benefits of sourdough. You're kind of messing with it a little bit, so you're starting to like know, what it's like to use sourdough, and you get a great sourdough pancake breakfast. So that's definitely what I would recommend starting with, and that's what I did a lot in the beginning when I had no idea about sourdough. That's what I did, and I liked it a lot. My kids love it. My husband loved it. And so I would definitely recommend that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great idea. I feel like pancakes are easy for everything. It's funny because growing up, we didn't ever really make pancakes from scratch. It was always like the packaged, you know, crusty or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Right.
And so when I became a homemaker, just like realizing like the simplicity of pancakes from scratch, like, oh, like
Yeah.
that's really easy, like, you know, like
Right.
so that's great. And so can you explain what discard is, just in case people are brand new to this and they don't understand fully what discard is?
Right. Sure. So discard is basically when you're going to feed your starter again, it's that initial amount of flour and water that you started off with. So when you're going to feed your starter again, you want to remove some so that you have less, so that when you go to feed it, because you're going to have to keep multiplying the amount of flour and water that you're going to add. And at the end, you're probably going to have, you're going to be using like an exponential amount of flour and water. So you want to discard some. So basically just remove some of that water and flour that you had before that made the sourdough starter. And that's the discard, the part that you remove. And usually it's not active or bubbly or anything because most likely it was in the fridge. And so you can use that to just ferment other, instead of getting the rise out of it, you can just use it to like ferment or sour other baked good products that you're going to make.
Perfect. And how much do you leave? If you're discarding, you want to leave some to feed again. So like
Right.
have you heard what like the minimum is for that, or what do you usually like to leave in the container?
So I usually leave very little because you really don't need that much to continue your starter from going. So honestly, even if you like basically get almost all of the starter out and just have like bits like around the cup or whatever container you have your starter in, because when you feed it, it's the less amount of starter that you have compared to the amount of flour and water that you add. Your starter is actually going to be stronger that way because you're feeding it a lot more than what is there. Because if you have too much starter and you're not feeding it enough flour and water, it's not gonna be fed enough, and so it's not gonna be as strong. So actually having less starter starting off with and then adding more water and flour, you get a stronger starter, if that makes sense. I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good and interesting. And my only advice, I guess, would be like don't spatula it out,
Oh yeah, for sure. You want like
dump it.
bits in there. Yeah. Yeah, dump it. Exactly.
And then did we talk about how to use the discard? Sorry,
Yes, we did.
I was distracted. Okay, and then let's go over the benefits of sourdough. Like, why would we pick sourdough over, some of the other options out there?
Right. So when I even started doing sourdough, it was really because I had like health issues, gut issues, and I was doing a lot of research. And in my research, I found that sourdough was the best for your gut for a few reasons. One being that when you sour your flour, it really breaks down a lot of the anti-nutrients that are in the wheat. And it makes the nutrients in the wheat actually more bioavailable for your body to be able to absorb. So yeah, it breaks down all of the things in the wheat products that are hard for our bodies to digest because a lot of people have like gluten issues, and using a sourdough starter can actually break down. It doesn't completely eliminate the gluten, but it breaks it down a lot. And so that's why it's a lot easier for a lot of people to digest. I know for me, it's a lot easier for me to digest. Um, and yeah, honestly, the taste, that sour taste is just really good. A lot of people really enjoy it. I know me and my family really enjoy it. And so that's like another reason why. I know that a lot of products that you even buy out in store, they might not even be authentic sourdough where like they actually use the sourdough to rise it, but just that taste, they add that just sourdough taste in there that people really like.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that flavor. It's I don't know, it's nice.
It's really like tangy. It's a different flavor that we don't really get, I feel like, in our
Yeah,
regular.
yeah, I love it in my bread, and it's funny because I got my starter from my neighbor, and they actually don't like theirs very sour,
Oh,
and
really? Okay.
so they try to I don't know how they do it, or I guess you pour off that liquid that can form on the top, right? And that
Oh,
makes
the
it
hooch.
sour. Yeah,
Right. Okay.
and I think I'll leave mine on more and just mix it in. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
And so I was also gonna ask if you like what are the limitations of using your sourdough starter? Like can it be used in any baked good, or is there certain ones that you can't use it in? And then like is there other ways to use it?
Okay. Well, I personally, I I can't say for certain because I have not actually researched this, but I personally think that you can use sourdough for anything because if you think about it, before commercial yeast was made, that's how people used to leaven their products, right? They would use some sort of sourdough or some sort of, I mean, that's how they would, make their bread rise and whatever. And so I think you can use it in everything. I add it to everything. Um, like I said, it's really good because it breaks down the gluten and other anti-nutrients in the wheat. So I like to add it just for that benefit, but also it tastes really good. You can add it to anything. I've added it to so many different things. I can't think of, any baked good that I have made that I haven't tried to make it sourdough in one way or another, or found a recipe for it. And sorry, what was the other question?
I think that was the basic.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm like mom brain over here too. So
Yeah, it's okay.
um, and then like when you cover, so a question about covering your sourdough starter is do you have to have like the special covers? And we mentioned like a dish rag. Um, but like what else can people use saran wrap when they're covering it, or what's your suggestion on that?
So I've used tons of different things. I have used like saran wrap over. I've used I like those like beeswax covers. Those are really nice because they just, you can use it over and over again, and it just like you just press it on with the warmth of your fingers. It kind of molds it. That's really nice. If you have a plate that covers the bowl, you can put that on top. Anything that will prevent your bread or whatever from forming that, that tough skin on the outside, anything that will prevent that. So yeah, you could use a plate, a saran wrap, a plastic bag. You can cover it with a tea towel and then put it in a plastic bag. I do that a lot when I go to proof it overnight in the fridge.
Mhm.
So you can basically use anything.
Yeah, and just to differentiate for people, so your starter needs to be able to breathe. So you don't want it sealed with like saran wrap or anything like that, right? The starter.
Right. Yeah.
But
Oh, no,
then
no. Yeah.
when it's kneaded together and like rising, that's when you
Yes.
have more of that still on it just to help it rise. And someone
Yes.
asked, how long does it take for the starter to rise, and how long does it usually take for the bread to rise? And so I'll let you answer that.
So that also varies. I'm sorry. Is there like too much noise going on? Because my washer is going on right now. Okay, good. Okay. Just
I'm like,
wanted to
I
make
can't
sure.
hear anything. So
Okay. So yeah, it really depends. It really varies because I know that certain recipes that I've used before, you could feed the starter and within 4 hours it can be ready to use. But I've also waited like 24 hours after my starter, like I fed my starter, it rose and started to fall, and I still use it for bread, and the bread rose perfectly fine. So it really depends. I think the threshold for certain recipes is like 4 to 12 hours, and for others, it can even be anywhere from like 24 plus hours. But if you're starting out and you have a recipe, I would stick to that because that leaves less room for error. And for the bread, so that also depends on a few things: how sour you want it, as well as um how much do you want the anti-nutrients to be broken down. So if you don't really have an issue with gluten per se, you can let it rise overnight. I like to put it in the fridge for bread because I feel like it gives it a really nice rise once you put it in the oven. You can do it just overnight. You prepare the bread throughout the day, you have it all formed and ready, and you put it in the fridge that night. In the morning, you pull it out of the fridge, and then you preheat your oven and put it in the oven to bake. I've also waited 48 hours. If like I'm super busy that day and I can't get to make baking the bread, I'll do it the next day and it comes out great every time. I wouldn't leave it past 48 hours though, because I have done that in the past and the bread, I don't know, it didn't rise well. It was super dense, and everything else, all the other steps that I did were the same. It was just that one step of leaving it in the fridge for too long that it didn't turn out right for me. So you can play around with it because I've done that, just left it in the fridge for like 12 hours. It worked out. 24, you can see what works best for you. But like I said, for me, if I left it past 2 days in the fridge, it wasn't going to turn out right.
yeah, for sure, for sure. And I was gonna say too, depending on where you live, like how hot it is where you live and stuff will determine like the rise on your starter, and I guess even your bread. Um,
Yeah,
and then like the seasons too, because I know in the summer, like my kombucha and my sourdough go way quicker, and in the winter
right.
it takes forever. So, and I have heard where you can put them in the oven, with the light on, but
Mm-hmm.
my oven light is way too strong, and so it like
Yeah.
bakes the top of it, and so it just
Oh, yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you because I've actually never done the fridge. I need to. So when you pull it out of the fridge, how long do you have to let it set till it's at room temperature, or can you just take that because it's already risen, right? By the time you put it in the
Right.
fridge, so you
Yeah.
a rise and then you pull it out. And are you doing a second rise in a pan or are you doing just it's ready to go in the oven?
So when I put it in the fridge, what I do is, so I'll, I make the bread, I knead it, and then I'll put it in the banneton basket or like the proofing basket. And then as soon as I put it in the basket, I'll like I wrap it in a tea towel, put it in a plastic bag, like a grocery bag, and then I put it in the fridge right away. So then it does that second, or yeah, like the second rise or the bulk in the fridge overnight. And then I pull it out like in the morning. Let's say I wake up, I start the oven, I keep the bread in the fridge. Once the oven is preheated and my pot is like really hot, the Dutch oven is in the oven really hot, then I pull out the bread, I score it, and then I'll pull out the Dutch oven, put it in, and then I bake it like that.
Okay, perfect.
And
And
I
then
found that, sorry, I was going to say, I found that that works the best.
no,
Because when I leave it out for too long and like let it, I don't know, I like to put it when it's really cold out of the fridge. I feel like that helps the rise really well. I feel like when I've in the past, when I've taken it out and kind of let it like come to room temperature, that it didn't have the best rise.
yeah, no, that makes sense. And then explain to people why you score it.
So yeah, you definitely want to score it, because if not, your bread is just going to crack or like it'll kind of explode. So you want to score it so that air, because it steams in the Dutch oven. So air can release out of it. You want to score it so that it prevents it from, yeah, like exploding, or just it'll ruin your bread if you don't score it, so that air can, yeah, escape it while
Yeah.
it's baking.
And do you guys always make yours in the rounds, the round loaves?
So I have a round one and I have like an oval one. And so I've only done those two for like just a regular sourdough like bowl or whatever. But yeah, I've only done those, but I have seen people put it in a just like a regular sheet pan in the oven without like putting it in the Dutch oven. And I'm sorry.
Yep.
And I thought that was really cool. I've wanted to try that. But I think I've seen that you have to like spray it with water because it needs some sort of steam so that it gets that nice crust on it. Yeah.
That makes
So
sense. That's a good
yeah,
tip.
I want to try that.
I don't have a Dutch oven.
Okay.
So I found recipes online just to make regular sandwich loaves with it.
Oh, okay.
And so I've done sandwich loaves, and then if I have too much, I will put it on those sheet pans like you're saying. But I haven't ever tried doing the water like you were talking about.
Yeah, I've seen people like you just lightly spray it, or also some recipes that I've made with sourdough, you put like a pan of water at the bottom. So that also creates steam. So I made like baguettes and stuff, or not baguettes, ciabatta rolls, super good. And yeah, you put the little pan of water at the bottom so that it helps steam and it makes that really nice crust on the top.
Yeah, that's great. Those are good tips. And then what about like the container that you use for your sourdough starter? Does the container matter?
It doesn't. I've like varied on what kind of containers I've used, because I have had it in like a huge sourdough, in a huge mason jar. I would put my sourdough starter in like a huge mason jar. And then I transferred it to like just a huge Pyrex bowl. And then I kind of go back in between those two. But honestly, any sort of glass, you don't want to leave it in plastic. You don't want to leave it in metal. You want to have some sort of glassware. And that, I think that's pretty much the only requirement, just some sort of glass.
Yeah, and just to verify, like clarify, I guess, is you don't want it in those other ones the
Yes.
metals and the plastic from it. And so that
Yes.
glass is the preference. So this is a great question. How often do you change or clean your sourdough starter container?
I don't very often. Very once in a while I will. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. It's great.
Once in a while I will. If it gets very, very crusty at like the top and like the lid is barely like, able to screw on, then I'm like, all right, I think it's time to change it out. But honestly, I just keep it in the same container. I know, like I said, there are people that change it out every time they see their starter and they measure. I don't know. I feel like I'm more rustic about it, and I'm just like, it's in one jar, it's working, it's fine. I'll just eyeball it all, and it always works out for me. So I think it really is preference. If people are more you know, like me, it might work out for them. And there are people that prefer like to have everything measured out and everything in a super clean brand new container, whatever works for them. This whatever helps you stick to it, I think, do that.
Yeah. And I do want to say too, like the container is still clean even when you do let it go. Like as far as like if it wasn't like you'll see if your starter gets ruined, there'll be like mold forming and different,
Right.
like you'll know and it'll smell different. It won't smell the way it's supposed to, because obviously starter smells different as far as like the sourness, but it'll have a different
Right.
smell and you'll know it's bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
That's
I
true.
know for me personally, like I'll do the same container until it starts bothering me, like you're saying, like that crusty, like it gets
Yeah,
like, yeah, I'm gonna switch out. Like,
right.
does that matter what kind of water you use?
Yes, you don't want to use tap water because that'll kill the chlorine and everything will kill your sourdough starter. So just any sort of filtered water. For the longest time, I just used like bottled water. Now we have a filter, so I use filtered water. We also get we have like a water delivery and we get like the Mountain Valley water. So honestly, any water as long as it's not chlorinated, I would say,
Yeah,
or like tap water.
so can you refrigerate sourdough starter and like why would you, I guess is kind of the question.
Yes, you can and you should. So I mean, unless you're in a very good routine where like, you feed your starter, you bake with it, you feed it right away, you keep that process going. If you're gonna take a break from it or out of town, whatever, for whatever reason, if you can't make something with your starter, you're gonna want to put it in the fridge to preserve it because if you just leave it out, it's gonna go bad unless you're consistently feeding it. Yeah, you're gonna want to put it in the fridge, store it in the fridge. Honestly, I know that people say that you can only store it for like a month or whatever. I keep mine in the fridge for like there are seasons like right now where I can't really bake with sourdough starter for a lot of different reasons. And so it's been in the fridge for like 2 months now, and I've kept it in the fridge for longer than that. So yeah, I feel like it's always fine there, and I'm always able to pull it out again and revive it whenever I need to bake with it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like, and I feel like that with a lot of stuff. Like there really isn't like an expiration date, but like just check it and see what it's like and what it smells like and make sure there isn't
Right.
growing on there that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
So do you do the starter float test at all?
No, I know that I think I actually have done it one time just out of curiosity because I've seen other people do it online. But no, I've never actually used it like to see if it was ready to bake with. I just kind of go off of if the rise was good enough, then I feel like it's ready to be used.
That's how I am too. And I don't know, like when you make like knead after it's kneaded and stuff, do you do like I've heard of like people doing like the window test on it and stuff. Do you do that?
So I have done it a few times when I followed Farmhouse on Boone's recipes. Those are the only times that I've done it because just because I just wanted to know that it was like needed enough to her instructions, but other than that I don't regularly do that, no.
Yeah, and I don't either. I've never even tried it, but like yeah, I've seen her say the window test, and I feel like I've seen a couple other people do that too. So um and then with the fewer bubbles, like some people be like, oh, my starter's not as bubbly as yours, or it's rising so slow. Like what's wrong? What words of encouragement do you have for that?
I would just say that there's a learning curve to everything, especially something as brand new as sourdough. Just I would just try to bake with it anyway. Unless, there's like user error, like there's something specifically wrong that you're not doing, you're not maybe feeding it enough. Maybe I would try feeding it more water or more flour than water, maybe getting it a little bit thicker, or maybe you're feeding it too much flour. There are some things that you can tweak here and there to make sure that it's just being fed appropriately. But yeah, other than that, sometimes it's just going to take, especially if you're starting your own starter from scratch, like I said, sometimes it's just going to take some time. Sometimes it just needs to mature more. But just start off with those discard recipes so that you can get that starter going. And maybe when it gets to a place where it is bubbling enough or it is rising enough, then you can start those recipes where you actually need to have, uh, like a very live and active starter to like bake bread, for example.
Yeah, no, that's great. Good advice. And then how many times should you feed your starter each day?
I only feed it I mean, it depends, right? Like if you're gonna use it very often, I only ever feed it if I'm gonna use it. If not, it's in the fridge.
Yeah.
So
And
like the
like,
night before or whatever.
yeah, and I know typically because like I like to kind of like batch my bread and like I'm in that mode of like I'm making bread, you know. So sometimes I'll
Mm-hmm.
spend like 2 days, maybe 3 days, like just making a bunch of bread. And so as soon as I use the starter, I'll like feed it again, you know, and then like I
Right.
keep that kind of over and over again. So sometimes it can be depending on how quick that rises, you know, it can be a couple times.
Right. Yes.
Um, so adjusting, how do you adjust the sourdough starter feeding schedule around work schedules or events or whatever you're doing in life?
Right. So that's something that I'm still trying to figure out. I'm like really bad at that, honestly. I don't know. I need to be more of a planner. I'm just not. Maybe that's just like my more laid back nature, but I need to be like more structured, you know? And so I do struggle with that. I have killed like a sourdough starter before doing that because I thought that I was going to bake the bread. And so I pulled it out, I fed it, and then like the day got away from me. And then I fed it again for whatever reason. And I just left it there. And then I just left it for like 2 days on the counter. And then it just, so I would say if you have like a busy schedule coming up, and this is what I've been trying to do before, I took this break, but what I was trying to do is if I had a really busy schedule is I would write out like, okay, feed the starter at this time, and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z during this time block. And then by the time that I had fed the starter and I was doing whatever I was doing between those hours, it would be ready. And so I would, you know, make my bread or whatever I was having to make that night. And then overnight, it would either have to ferment or rise in the fridge. And so I just recommend like writing it out or like making some sort of schedule if you are super busy and you have to like plan around certain things. But like I said, it's something that I'm having to work on myself because I'm not very good at planning things or like timing things out.
Yeah, well, and I feel like my sourdough starter has like tricked me sometimes. Like sometimes it'll take forever to rise. I'm like, it's not risen yet. Like I was expecting it so I could like do it right then, you know. And then
Right.
times it goes like so fast, and I've like sent pictures to my neighbor, and it's like bubbling over, and I'm just like, oh my
Uh-huh.
goodness, like I totally can do this now, you know.
Right. And like you said, I mean, the time of year, like the weather and all of that, your altitude and everything, like a lot of stuff will mess with just your baking in general, but especially like your rising and all of that of your sourdough starter.
Exactly, exactly. And then I think past the starter point is utilizing, like you're saying, the fridge to like, you know, if the bread rises, because you can even can't you put it in the fridge before it rises too? You can just mix all the ingredients, throw it in the fridge, and then pull it out and let it rise, or is that a no-no?
I haven't ever done that, so I don't know. I always,
Test it.
yeah. I mean, I guess we could test it out and see if that works. Because honestly, anything for convenience, like when you have, full days, busy schedules, like your kids are, anything that you can just like throw together and just, so maybe that'll be something to try out. But I have never tried that out in the past.
Yeah. So then someone else said that their sourdough starter gets a clear, thin liquid that smells like alcohol on top. Should I throw it out? So that's kind of what we are talking about a little bit ago.
So, when it's clear, I just mix it in, honestly. When it's like black or like that kind of grayish color, I just dump it out really quick and then I'll just continue on with my starter. I never really worry about it.
Yeah. And so they call that liquid hooch, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, they said you could totally just stir it back in or you can dump it off the top. And it's also a sign that you're not feeding your starter often enough. And then I feel like mine typically comes up when it's in the fridge. What about yours?
Yeah, when it's in the fridge for a long period of time, yeah, it's a sign that it needs to be fed. I don't really think it would happen if it were on. I mean, maybe it would happen really quickly if you left it on the counter for too long, but then if you don't feed it and it's on like the counter, it probably would just die or get moldy.
Yeah, yeah. So is there anything else that you would like to say about sourdough? Any like is let's start with this, I guess. Who is there certain people that you like to follow, certain recipes that you like specifically that you can say, oh, I recommend this cookbook or this person?
Yes, for sure. So, definitely Farmhouse and Boone. I really resonate with her recipes and her style of, baking just because that's how I am. Just like the very like eyeball and feel it out. If it feels like it's the right consistency, then, I really like that. Something that is a downside, but I think that she's starting to change this in her recipes, is I like using a scale for the sole purpose of less dishes, because whenever you use measuring cups, you got to wash all the measuring cups and you have to wash the teaspoons and everything. And so I like just being able to put it on a scale, knowing what number has to pop up there, and then it's all in one bowl and then it's done. So I like Farmhouse on Boone. I also like I think it's Little Spoon Farm. She has some really good recipes too. And honestly, just Pinterest in general. I'll just go on Pinterest whenever there's like a specific recipe that I'm wanting to make. I'll type in sourdough at the end, and I usually am able to find something really great.
Yeah, I love your point about dishes, like, because I don't even think about that, but that's so true. Like, it's so nice just being able to measure, and then like just the accuracy too of the scale,
Yes.
versus the measuring cups. So
Yeah.
dishes is a huge, like, that's why for me.
Yes.
So that's awesome. And then any like other tips or tricks you have that you'd like to share, or just anything else you'd like to say about sourdough?
I would just like to say that if you're considering doing sourdough or like trying it out, just do it. Just like bite the bullet and do it. Honestly, I've probably been doing it for like 4 years now. And I mean, it takes some time to like actually, I don't know, the first several loaves that I made were like not that bad, but it's just so exciting and encouraging to finally like make something, you pull it out of the oven, it looks like bread, it's edible, and like that just alone, like the the dopamine kick that you get from that, and you're like, I want to try it again and I want to perfect it. And it honestly becomes so much fun. Like, just being in your kitchen, eating some bread, and like and then seeing your family just enjoy like what you made. And if you have kids too, just like letting them like get in there and help you out. I mean, the kids love when I make bread, but then they also like just, kneading the dough and all that stuff. So it's just, I feel like it seems very intimidating. At least for me, it was very intimidating at first because of all the steps and the rules I thought I had to follow. But once I actually just started it and adapted it to how I take on baking and cooking and all that, which is throwing out the rules and just doing what feels right. Once I did that, it was so much easier and a lot of fun.
I totally agree with that. And I think like when I first started like cooking in general, everything, like I totally was like all about the recipes and the structure of all that. But I do agree, like it can be overwhelming and you can get like thinking like, oh, this task is way too big and too over my head and stuff. But I find often when I feel that way and then when I actually do it, I'm like, why didn't I do this sooner? Like it's so
Yes.
easy. And I made a bigger deal of it in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
I totally encourage anybody, just give it a go, try it, trial and error. It's fine. And yeah, there is such a benefit of like knowing you're feeding your family well, and like it's like a healthy, nutrient dense bread compared to just, regular bread. So
Yeah, absolutely.
there is totally a joy in it. And then will you let people know where to find you on social media and like
Yeah,
kind of what
sure.
your page is about?
Yeah, sure. So, I have an Instagram. It's called Her Vineyard. So it's HER dot and then vineyard, VINEYARD. And I just try to share like some homemaking encouragement, all the homemaking stuff, like, homeschool, kind of, not really, because I've just started that. So just sharing my stuff. I don't like teaching anything just because I am learning as I go, so just share for encouragement. um when I do like baking and sourdough and cleaning, just homemaking stuff, anything that really encompasses that. um and I also have a YouTube channel, but I honestly have not uploaded in so long, and it's just maybe not the season for it right now. I might do it again one day, but it's there if you want to watch the few videos that I have uploaded there. So yeah, just those two things.
Yeah, I was looking at your YouTube and you have a good following over there too. Like it's grown,
Thank
like
you. Yeah. When I was more consistent
videos,
with
right?
it, I had a lot of other like I had way more videos. I think I privated them or archived them, something like that. Yeah, like a
Yeah.
while ago. I don't know. I wanted to like change kind of the direction that I was going in with it, but then honestly, like life has just been so hectic and just so many ups and downs the past few years. So I was like, let me just take a break on that once I like figure out what's going on with, life. And I honestly really like the Instagram side of it just because you can put like short form content. And so it's easier to make and it's not like this super drawn out thing, and it's honestly it's a fun thing to do. But even with that, I need to work on consistency, honestly. So
Yeah, and I love your video content, like just the angles you get and the way you format it. I don't know, do you use filters on it?
I don't.
Okay, yeah, even like the lighting and everything, it's amazing.
Thank
Like this
you.
is good, Rebecca. I need some skills from you. Anyway, thanks for being here. And if anyone has any questions, please put it down in the comments below. And I'm sure Rebecca can, answer any other questions that you guys might have. And thanks again so much, Rebecca.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.